This is episode 109 of the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I'm Carly Cade, and today I'm speaking with Linda Ballou. Nothing pleases Los Angeles-based adventure travel writer Linda Ballou more than seeing gorgeous country from the back of a good horse. She has had the pleasure of staying at guest ranches in Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Arizona, and California, along with horse treks in Ireland, Ecuador, and British Columbia. Her articles have appeared in Equus Magazine, Horse Illustrated, Western Horseman, California Riding Magazine, Equitrucking.com, and numerous travel publications. Saddle up for a conversation about travel writing, finding salvation in nature, and romancing the soul. In this conversation, Linda shares her love of travel, horses, and writing while taking us on an epic journey from the volcanoes of Hawaii to the majestic mountains of Colorado. She discusses her newest book, Embrace of the Wild, a work of historical fiction about Isabella Bird, a dynamic woman, equestrian, and British explorer in the 19th century who pushed the boundaries of what was expected of women in her time. This interview will inspire you to appreciate the powerful women who paved the way for the modern woman. Take the trip that's calling you, notice nature's bounty, and put pen to paper. Linda urges us to remember to take time for romancing our souls along the way. Now, let's get into the interview. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast, a podcast featuring interviews with equestrian authors who love all things horses and writing about them. In each episode, you'll hear inspirational stories from horsebook authors, including writing advice and marketing tips to help you write your very own horsebook. If you're an author, aspire to be an author, or simply love horsebooks, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Carly Cade, and creative writing makes my spurs jingle. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I'm Carly Cade, and today I'm excited to welcome Linda Ballou to the show. Hi, Linda. Welcome.
Hi, Carly.
So great to have you here. And for people who listen to the podcast, or if you're new to the show, how I always like to start off these conversations is learning a little bit more how horses have touched the lives of the authors that come on and speak with me. So, Linda, how have horses touched your life?
Well, when I was a little girl, I lived next door to a breeding and boarding ranch for racehorses. And for 50 cents a week, I watered the horses. I fell in love with horses, but I couldn't ride them because, they were racehorses. So it wasn't until I was 37 years old that I could afford to own my own horse. And she became my whole life. And for 10 years, I was just hook, line, and sinker. And, we did a very dicey bit of dressage, just good enough to get into the 3-day events. And, we jumped, and I love to trail. I just love to trail. And my writing, I've always been writing. All my life I've been writing. But I never had a published piece until I published in Horse Illustrated. And that article was called The Art of Falling, because I was a senior citizen in this arena. And my trainer said, you're going to fall. You're going to fall. I'm going, well, if I'm going to fall, why don't you teach me how to fall? Well, they never did that. So I went around, I interviewed an orthopedic surgeon, a vaulting champ, a gymnast, and I put together an equestrian fall.
That's amazing. What a great topic.
And that was my first published piece. And it was like putting the things together that you love, bring you where you want to go. So, and then I went on to publish in Equus. And actually, I got injured, which happens, but not from one incident. It was just, I was doing too much. And my body just said, honey, you're not doing this anymore. And she was my best friend. And I didn't realize how attached I was to this animal until I had to give her up. And I gave her to Hearts and Horses, where she helped with handicapped kids. And I was able to come out and groom her, which was very important in a healing. I injured my back. So it was very important in my healing process to be able to be with her and just groom. and walk and be outdoors with her. Finally, after being crawling around on my hands and knees for about 6 weeks, I was able to walk again. But in the process, I wrote Cowgirl Jumped Over the Moon. Now, Cal, you asked me, about Cowgirl Jumped to the Moon, and what it was my way of letting go of
Mm.
the horse world, the jumping, and my in Cowgirl, my protagonist Jim C. She's in the Grand Prix jumping circuit. She goes up into the high Sierras. She does everything that I ever wanted to do on a horse. And I didn't publish that book right away. It stayed in my drawer for quite a long time. But then as I healed, I was thinking, okay, what do I love horses. I love riding. I love the outdoors. How about being an adventure travel writer? Ah, that might work, right?
Fantastic. And I
So
was going to ask you about that. I know that you as I galloped around your website, you obviously love horses, but there's this huge element that you're into now, which is travel. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about your love of travel?
I put those three things together, and I put together a query to a high-end ranch in Telluride, Colorado. It's called Skyline. And they said, come on up.
Mhm.
And I went, really? All right. I'm on my way, packing my bags. And it was the most fabulous experience. I mean, this was a really sophisticated group of riders and fine horses. And Skyline Ranch was up on a mountain overlooking these 14ers in Telluride. And it was a fantastic experience that I could have never afforded. It was quite expensive. And at the time, there was a young woman named Emma who was English, and she was taking groups out. And she had us jumping over logs and you know, galloping through the forest and going up to these marvelous views. And I mean, it was fabulous. So I wrote an article to Ride Among the Clouds. And Equus picked it up. Equus magazine picked it up. So you see how it's carried forward, my love of horses, my love of riding, my love of writing, my love of being outdoors. And, it just keeps taking me further and further. Right now I don't own a horse, but I go to guest ranches. I've stayed at and written about guest ranches in Colorado and Wyoming, Montana, Ecuador. I did a horse trek in Ecuador on the Inca Trail. Oh, I did one in British Columbia. Just before the pandemic, I did a horse pack trip up into the backcountry of British Columbia, and that was really incredible.
Wow, so that's amazing. So you're back since you wrote Cowgirl Jumped Over the Moon. Your back has gotten to the place where you can ride again.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. I can ride. I just can't jump. I can't take those kinds of risks.
hmm
And when I owned my horse, I also lived in the city, Studio City, and I had my horse out in the country.
mm.
So I was commuting every day, working full time, selling real estate, which I've done all my adult life also to keep a roof over my head and, support my eating habit. But it's a very flexible career, which is why it works for me.
And I love this. I love how you've taken your passions, which are horses and travel, and spun them into something that is a career for you. What would you say to someone who has a dream or a passion and they're like, "Oh, I could never do anything with that." I mean, you are evidence that you can. So, what would you say to someone who wants to take
I think the
something like
most
that on?
important thing is to visualize yourself doing it.
Mm.
You see yourself doing it, meditate on yourself doing it, uh, and simply start doing it. You want to be a writer? Right. Start journaling. You want to be a travel writer? Start reading travel books and other writing and see what they've done. And I have a short book. I wasn't going to get into it, but I've got a how to get great trips for free book,
Mm.
which I teach people in that book how to go through the back door. Right now it's really not very lucrative. Travel writing is not lucrative, period, because the digital world has taken it over,
Mm.
and so many people are giving their work for free, and print magazines are going under. So there's a whole transition. But with my method, you're not going to make a living with it, but you're going to get fabulous trips.
That sounds
So
lovely. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast would love to pick that up and learn how to
yeah,
get in the back
get
door.
great trips for free. It's
Awesome.
the renegade way to go. But basically, you know, like I say, a lot of people say they want to write, but they never get around to doing it. I mean, you just have to, make it a part of your life. That is what you do,
Yep. Shoehorn in that time to get the words on the page, whatever it takes. And it's sometimes a toughie. Now, you have written a new book, and I'm really excited to talk to you about your latest release, Embrace the Wild, the images behind you over your shoulder. This is a historical fiction based on a woman who is incredibly inspiring. And I wanted to thank you for sending over a copy so I could read it before we discussed the
Ah,
book. Can you talk with us about Embrace the Wild and what inspired you to take this on and write about such a amazing, adventurous woman?
dynamic woman. Yeah. How did I have the chutzpah to write her story first person when she, in fact, was the best level tribal writer of her day?
Mhm.
And her writing is far superior to mine. But her writing is also quite flowery and dense for modern readers.
Mm.
So I first met Isabella Bird, who is a Victorian age woman whose life didn't really begin until she was 40 years old. But I met her when I was researching for my first novel, which is Wainani, A Voice from Old Hawaii. And she spent 6 months in the Sandwich Islands, and she wrote a book about it. And I used her book for research for that. And then when I was in Colorado, I met her again
Mhm.
because she became research for my stories that I wrote about in Colorado, my articles, and so on. And I was just, I had been an admirer of hers for decades, at least 2 decades.
Mhm.
But then the pandemic hit, and I'd sort of been noodling around about wanting to write her life, but I was busy. I was having fun. I was traveling here and there. And all of a sudden, the music stopped, and I went, I think I can do it. I think I can do it. I think I can do it with this gift of time that I've received, whether I wanted it or not.
That's a good way to look at it. Absolutely.
So, she was a woman who inspired me in so many different ways. Because, like I say, her life didn't really begin until she was 40. And my travel writing life didn't begin for me until I was in my 40s. And she was an equestrian. She was an incredible equestrian. My God, this woman rode like a banshee. Well, let me just give you a little bit of background about her youth. She had a tumor on her spine, carbuncles, they called them. And the surgeons operated on her several times without any anesthesia on her
Mm.
back. And they gave her, she was like a victim of overdosing. They gave her laudanum, which is a form of morphine opium. And they bled her with leeches and incisions. And they advised her to drink copious amounts of alcohol, you know, and then and then because she couldn't hold her head up because she was such a mess, she would had nervous jitters and she called it lassitudes. We would call it depression, chronic depression. She couldn't lift her head up off the pillow. And by the time she was 40 and going through all of these things, right? Uh, and they had put her in a brace, in a metal brace, this medieval torture. And the poor woman finally got up off the invalid bed and said, "That's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm taking a sea voyage. I'm going around the world and I'm going to be myself." And she did. And there was a storm outside of New Zealand that forced them to go to Honolulu. And that is where her life changed because she saw the Hawaiian women and boys galloping across the Waikiki, the Honolulu Bay, in colorful garb and flowers and just wild abandon. And then she was just, oh my God, if I could only be with them, right? She was so drawn to this. By a stroke of luck, one of the guests said, why don't you go over to Hilo for a while and relax while they're fixing the boat? Oh, the boat had to go into dry dock. So she did, and she rode up the flank of the volcano there, the one that's been spewing lava so much in the last couple of years. And she had to ride astride, which ladies don't do. Victorian age ladies don't do that. They ride side saddle. And even though the ride was a very, very rough ride, very steep and challenging and through jungle and across lava fields and all of that, she wasn't in any pain. And
Mm,
she realized, oh my God, if I'm sitting upright with my my spine in alignment, I don't have any pain in my
mm,
back. So this was like mind blowing, right?
mhm,
So she stayed in the islands for 6 months and she grew strong and she had a sense, she got in touch with her own sensuality,
mm,
which had been buried in all of these drugs and all of this horrible treatment. I identified so strongly with this woman lifting herself up like that, and carrying forward and moving on and doing what she really wanted to do in life, which was travel and be a writer.
What is so incredible about this story is ladies traveling alone, let alone astride and not side saddle, was so unusual for that time. I mean, her story is so incredibly powerful, and I love that you could associate with her as well. I mean, I found her so bold and such a trailblazer, and we can talk a little bit more because it's one of the questions I want to ask you, in what ways her character foreshadows the modern woman. But let's wrap up with like her adventures, and then maybe we can hop into that question, because I want listeners to know that this is so unusual for that time period. I mean, what year was this? 18.
1860. Well, she left in 1873. 1873 is when she got to Colorado. I'll go on
Mhm,
now about the barriers that she broke through. Okay.
mhm,
For the first place, in the Victorian age, women were not even allowed to go to university.
mhm,
Her father was an evangelical preacher. So she was raised a very strict evangelical life where her mother got her up before dawn and made her get on her knees and say her prayers. And she was supposed to be self-sacrificing and always, and, get married, have children, be obedient, obey your husband. You had no life without marriage in that day. If you were not married by the time you were 21 or 2, you were a spinster.
mhm.
She did go on a voyage when she was 21 or 23. Her father sent her, her mother, they sent her on this voyage hoping she would meet someone to marry, but she wasn't looking to get married. And she wrote a good book about that time in the New World, New York, and she went down to quote unquote the slave states. And that book is interesting, but it's not her best writing because she was not free. She had to travel with a chaperone,
Mm.
and she had to go only to certain places, and most of them were churches. And so it wasn't, it was her first book, but not her best book. She had an aunt named Barbara who had been disowned by the family because she was a writer, she was single, she was unmarried, and she wasn't so big on Christianity. So Barbara, she, invited Isabella to spend some time with her, and Isabella then was introduced to an artistic colony, people who were doing things, with their lives different from what she had been exposed to. So that really influenced her. And she just was a strong willed person. She was very intelligent and she made most men feel uncomfortable because she was very, very bright. And as I say, marriage was not big on her list. So, yeah, she broke through all of that, all those social barriers to be herself and to follow her own destiny, which that's the forerunner for the modern woman, a person who is self actualizing.
Mhm.
Okay. My goal in life is self-actualization. That's to be myself to the hilt, to the most, to the best that I can be.
You go, girl. I love it.
So I think she is an empowered woman who, as I say, she wasn't going for fortune and fame. She was an explorer.
Mm.
And after my book ends in Colorado, because I certainly couldn't cover her whole life, because she went on to Japan and Korea and China and went to places where no white woman had even been seen before, and she did that by herself.
That's incredible. One question I did have, her family did have some money, right?
Well,
Because
she had a little bit of money, inherited money. By the time she took her sea voyage, her parents had died, and she had inherited a little bit of money. Yeah, she was of an upper class, and sometimes she's accused of being a snob, like
mm,
in some of her writing, especially in Hawaii, when she talks about the savages, and she describes them as heathens, or just a generation away from being heathen.
mm,
But at the same time, she lived with them and amongst them and spent time with them. And in the end, I think she really respected their gods, their mythology. I mean, she didn't, she was still a Christian through all of this.
mhm.
I mean, she still believed in the Christian beliefs and so on, but she appreciated other people's, spirituality.
Yeah, and I really got that from your book. I mean, she was always thinking about how to serve or help other people in need. And one thing that was really interesting too in the book was your descriptions, I think, based on her writing, of how they were treating the horses, and she wasn't keen on
That
some
was
of the
one thing,
ways.
the criticism she had of the Hawaiian people was that they were so hard on their animals. And in
Hmm.
fact, one of them breaks down on the ride, I mean, they just rode him into the ground. And it's odd because the Hawaiians are, such generous and kind people in other ways.
Hmm.
And so that but they used to eat dogs too. I mean, they didn't have this regard for animals.
And again, we're talking about 1860.
1873.
1873, yeah. So, I mean, things obviously have changed and progressed. I mean, the language that she used when writing would probably be very different now. The way people, are just is different. So, I feel like this is such an interesting peek at a time where this woman was doing these incredible things that women now can look to the past and say, wow, someone was doing things that we're all more capable of doing now, which is pretty incredible. To that note, how did you research this? I love that you said that you could relate with her because you had gone through an injury. You love horses, you love travel, you love writing. She was doing all those things too. So how did you research
I
in
did.
order to
I
write
went where
this?
she went. I've been all the places that she went in Hawaii. She didn't go just to Hilo. She went all over the island. She went to Maui. She went into the Haleakala crater.
Hmm.
She went all over. She spent time in Waipio Valley, which is in my book. And the reason that's in my book is because I spent 3 nights in Waipio Valley. I spent 3 nights in Waipio Valley at Mr. Araki's hotel for $15 a night. And
Wow.
that was before one year before they closed it to commercial enterprise. He was like this little Japanese man, was the only man who had a quote unquote hotel, which was a series of rooms on a porch in an enclosed lanai kind of thing. It's a screened in lanai, and I had a machete by my bed that was, just for good measure.
Oh my.
I was the only guest. And it was a wonderful experience for me because I was deep into, for my first book, this was research for my first book set in pre-contact Hawaii. And Waipio is the Valley of the Kings, and there's so many of the bones of many great chiefs are buried in the walls of Waipio Valley. It's a spiritual place. It's a sacred place. It's a gorgeous place. It's a special place, and I was there, and she was too. And she took the ride up to that waterfall. Well, I hiked up to that waterfall, so I was able to describe these places. I could compare my experience and of the place with hers, and these are places that have remained the same
Mm.
over the last 200 years,
Mhm.
because the Waipio Valley has been closed off. I mean, today you can take a 1-day trip down into the valley with guides,
Mhm.
but you can't spend the night in there anymore. So, and a volcano that she rode up the flank of the volcano. Naturally, I've been there. I hiked in Iki Crater, and I experienced these same things physically. I went to so, and in Colorado, of course, I wrote a one called "Riding in the Hoofbeats of Isabella Bird." That was an essay that I wrote that won the Solis Award in Travel Tales Publications, and I've been a lot of places. Now, what I'm doing next, I've created a mountain tour for myself, that goes in the 800 miles that she did. Previously, I just went to Estes Park in Rocky Mountain State Park, where she stayed most of the time, but she also rode 800 miles solo
Hmm.
in the Front Range. And so now in September, and she did it in the fall. So I'm going to do it in the fall. And I've got it all lined up. I'm so excited.
I can imagine. That's
I am
super
excited.
exciting.
I've got it lined up. I have a book signing in Evergreen with another historical fiction author who lives there. And then I'm going to these Fairplay, which was one of the little towns that she wrote about, where when she was there, it was vigilante rule and there was a hanging. I'm sure it's evolved, uh, but uh,
I hope so.
but the mountains are still the same.
Mhm.
And there's a little railroad there that I'm going to take, that a little narrow gauge train, and I'm gonna ride as much as I can, as many horseback riding opportunities as I can. I know I can ride a day in Rocky Mountain National Park,
Mhm.
and I'll hike in the places where I can't ride. And then I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation in Estes Park at the library there. And so, it's gonna be fun. And I don't make I don't make a living at this. I just have a ball, and so what's it all about?
Well, that's great. I can hear how fired up you are. I mean, you're living your passions, which is the
You
best
know,
thing ever. And now I understand that Isabella Bird wrote wrote books, or I'm sorry, wrote letters and captured her travels.
right.
And you read those, right? When
Yeah,
you
well,
were
her books are letters to her sister Henrietta,
mm,
and Henrietta just sort of lived vicariously through Isabella, and she helped edit her stories and helped the publishing process for Isabella while Isabella was out, out running around.
well, and that's part of history. If I mean, that's the most interesting thing about writing too. I mean, these letters were personal letters to her
Right.
sister, and then
She was journaling consciously, knowing that this was going to probably be interpreted into, translated into a book. Some of her letters are quite personal to Henrietta, but others are just simply descriptive of her experiences. And then I did read one book called Henrietta's Letters, which is the more personal selection that was not published, was not used in her published works,
mm,
Isabella's,
mhm.
but it was published later, and it has the more maybe things that she wouldn't have said in her more journalistic books. Also like meditative things, journaling.
Mhm.
It's journaling, and that's one thing. If you want to be a writer, journal.
Mhm. Do you want to talk a little bit more about Mountain Jim and what you uncovered
Okay,
about
I took
him?
some tremendous liberties with Mountain Jim
Okay, I was wondering.
because in reality, well, first of all, he was a devilishly handsome man. He had the gift of gab. He was well educated and he liked to write, and he, had lots of letters to the newspaper editors published in poetry and things like that. But he was also an alcoholic,
Mm,
and he was a teller of tales. And, nobody really knew Jim's true story. Like, the one thing they did know is that he was mauled by a bear.
mhm.
He was attacked by a bear, and half of his face was disfigured very badly. So he was like the tragic comedy figure in my mind. And to me, he was like, great good and great evil. And I really loved his character. And I made him more sympathetic by giving him a backstory that happened in Colorado in the Sand Creek Massacre, which is an incident in the history of our country that was hugely overlooked. And the place where the Sand Creek Massacre took, where the Cheyenne people were literally slaughtered at dawn by the soldiers, Union soldiers, who at that time the policy was extermination, and the Indians wanted to make peace and live with the white people, but they couldn't because the soldiers were intent on exterminating them. So when this particular massacre happened, of which there were many, it really fueled the Indian wars, because when they attacked Black Kettle's tribe, who was a peace chief who had been given, safe passage, when they did that, that told the Indians, we can't get along with the white people. We have to fight. We have to fight to the death because they're going to kill us. And that bothered me. Okay. And when I read that, they did put a monument up in 2005, I think, where the Sand Creek Massacre took place. But for many years, the people just put it under the rug. I think the Coloradans maybe were not real proud of that particular incident in their history and didn't want to talk about it. And they may not appreciate me bringing it to light, frankly.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I love that you mentioned that you took some liberties with Mountain Jim, and then you gave him a backstory. Talk to us about, because this is a story about real people, real events, but you fictionalized it. Talk to us about how you prepare to do something like that, or think it through, and what your strategy is towards writing the fictionalized.
Okay, for me, it was just the only way I could tell the story. And I did it in 3 parts, which is very unconventional. I mean, you're a writer, you're supposed to have a dramatic spine, you have how it works, and that's supposed to work in historical fiction too, but it didn't work for me. I couldn't do it without telling his story separately, because I wanted, when they met, for people to understand why these 2 very damaged people were soulmates. And why they fell in love with one another, and why it couldn't possibly go anywhere for her, but why it happened. They both, and this goes to the theme song in all of my work, which is that you can find salvation in nature.
And you write very elegantly about the natural world, and I believe that's because of all your travel. And I feel like
exactly
you could really connect with these 2 characters because they are also of that mindset. Now, speaking of writing, how do you structure your writing time? What do you have a routine?
Yes, if I'm working on a book or an essay, I will read the night before on the topic. I'll read a book or something about it, and I'll enlist my subconscious.
I love that.
Work for me. And when I wake up in the morning, I don't do anything. I don't check my email. I don't talk to my other half. I don't do anything until I do my writing. And I'll write, for a couple of hours. And that's usually about, as long as I go. And maybe 500 words, something like that. And then I'll, go on with the rest of the day, do what I need to do. And then part of my day is going for a hike. I go out for a couple of hours and I hike. I live in the hills. I live in the mountains. And then I come back and I read what I've written aloud, because I really think that's very helpful to hear what you've said and to see if it flows. And I edit it a little bit, and then I go on to the next chunk, of it. And that is a beautiful writing day for me. And I feel very good and accomplished with a day like that.
Sounds lovely. I always like to say I also like to write first thing in the morning, because I always feel satisfied having gotten that done, and then getting on to other things, because I can go
do whatever I got to do.
Right. I feel guilty at the end of the day if I set aside my writing time and didn't get the writing done. So I think morning is, I mean, everybody writes differently, but mornings is a great strategy. It obviously works for
Yeah.
you. Now, I want to shift a little into the business side of
Yeah.
being an
Okay. Which I
author.
was just going to say, I haven't been writing lately because in the last year, well, the first year of the pandemic, I wrote Embrace of the Wild. The second year of the pandemic, I went, "Ugh, okay, I can't, let's, you know, get better at this game,
Mhm.
So I spent a lot of time, fleshing out platforms, studying platforms, figuring out what's new, what's great, what's bad. And podcasts are a great way to get this information without straining your brain. And there are a ton of them, and they're very, very, very helpful, I find. And so I put all my books on Ingram Spark so that available to bookstores, not just ebook channels.
Mhm.
And Draft to Digital, by the way, just merged with Smashwords,
I
which is going to
know.
be huge. And I'm getting all my books over there. I'm stepping up my game. I'm quite good at placing Amazon ads now that work. I studied that little scene. And, you know, I've did a lot of experimenting with what works, what doesn't work, what's going to be valuable for me. And I think it's going to pay off. I haven't done a lot of writing in the last year because I've been focused on that. Also, getting podcasts like yours. I'm very so pleased to be here because you're great, and uh, it's for me. I think the way to go to market your books is virtual events.
Mm.
I've got a panel now with another historical fiction author, Strong Women in the West, which we are submitting to various venues. And I have PowerPoint presentations for all my books that I can take, anywhere people would like me because of Zoom,
Mhm.
and I love this. I think that the pandemic has very positive impact for people who are marketing anything, but particularly for authors. It's a lot of work to go for me, I live in LA, drive across town, take all my, take all the stuff that's required for a good signing or a talk. And so, yeah, that's what I think that's going to be very beneficial for me in this year and coming years.
So I'm hearing that you took some time off to like really polish up your skills around
Right.
marketing and the book business. You're an independent author. Is that correct?
Oh, am I ever? I just want to tell you the little story because I want to tell this to people who are writing and, don't know whether or no they have the moxie to publish. I shared this book. I have an editor. I don't put anything out that isn't fully edited and vetted and, you know, done carefully. And I shared it with a Hawaiian woman who was married to a Hawaiian chief. She was Haole, but she was married to a Hawaiian chief. And she said to me, if you publish this story, you will receive 200 years of bad luck.
Uh-oh. Why?
You are stepping on sacred Hawaiian toes, because I'm telling the Hawaiian story, the history that they never put it together. They just give you bits and pieces. I put together the whole picture, you see. That set me back for about a year. I mean, I was sobbing. I was so hurt. I was like, oh my God, I can't, I thought they would love me for this, right?
Unexpected response. 200 years of bad luck.
Bad
So
luck.
did you shelf it or did you go ahead anyway?
It took me a year to work up to doing anyway,
Okay,
to
got
do
it.
it anyway. It really hurt me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really set me back. I went, wow, I thought I did something really good and I did my best. And I was so, you know, worked so hard to keep this authentic and then I just decided, you know what? It's my book.
Hmm.
And whatever you publish, whatever you do, not everybody's going to love it.
This is true.
People who take offense to what you've done. I've had, some very odd comments, but mostly I've had wonderful reviews from not only Hawaiians, people who've lived in the islands for many years and very, intimate knowledge of the Hawaiian culture and so on. So I feel gratified and rewarded. And, I'm so glad I published that book.
And on the topic of the 200 years of bad luck, it seems like you're doing okay. So you haven't had the 200 years of bad luck, which I'm very
No,
glad to hear.
yep.
How and you've written how many books now?
I have 3 novels and I have 1 travel collection of travel essays that is my most meaningful, my most memorable travel experiences. Lost Angel in Paradise is my little handbook that gives you 32 day trips up the coast of California because
Oh,
I
cool.
love the coast. I live here and I love all these places on the coast.
Awesome. So that's 7. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I have, well, if you include get great trips for free, I might have written 8.
8. Okay. So we have written 8 books, and I know writing one book is a heck of an accomplishment. So how do you celebrate your successes and milestones as a writer?
Romancing your soul.
Aw.
And that's what I do. I do it every day. I do something for me every day. But if I do something like if I feel gratified about an accomplishment, then I probably will take off. I'll go to the beach. I'll pick up some sushi and I'll hang out at the beach. I'll go for a swim. I'll go for a walk. I'll do my yoga. We do some meditations and I'll just have
Nice.
a beautiful outdoor day. And that's
Romancing
what I
the
love.
soul. I love that.
That's right.
Romancing
I
the
romance
soul.
my soul. But you can do it with art, the smile of a baby, but put some, the secret, let's see, the secret to youth is to fill your mind with beauty.
Hmm.
Ah, and it just blows out all that negativity. Even if something bad's going on, you'll feel fine at the end of the day.
I love that. All right, everyone, let's romance our souls every single day and do something grand in the romancing our soul category when we finish those books, right? That's great advice, Linda. So, for you as an author, what has been the best part of being a writer? But then on the flip side, what has been the most challenging thing for you?
Well, the best part, and I think well, there's several best parts of writing, but I think it's really wonderful when people uh, are transformed by your writing.
Mm,
Like, remember The Art of Falling
mhm,
that I wrote, first
mhm.
published article?
In Horse
Years later.
Illustrated.
Yep. Years later, I went to a guest ranch in Colorado, and it was early in the year, and the horses were a little jumpy. So
Feisty.
we had to go back off the trail and go into the round pen, and we were galloping around to get the bucks out.
Mhm.
Well, one of them bucked one of the buckaroos off, right? So at dinner, the man who got bucked off came over to me and he said, little lady, you saved my life. What do you mean, I've saved your life? Yeah, I read that article of yours and I kept it. I kept it in my barn. And you know what? That's why I didn't break a leg today.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And I went, really? So it
Mhm,
made me feel that my writing is worthwhile, that people are reading it and, I want people to enjoy it.
mhm.
And I think the hardest part, let me see, I've already talked about taking criticism. You got to do it, so you have to just roll with the punches, I mean, and keep rolling because Amazon thinks that's good for you to have one or two bad reviews because then they think that means people are actually reading your stuff.
Mm,
I don't know if that's true or not. All I know is you just can't get attached to either compliments or criticisms. I think it's wonderful when people compliment my writing, and it makes me think what I'm doing is worthwhile. I'd be doing it anyway, but it's really nice if they compliment me. But if they criticize me, I just have to not be attached to those emotions.
mhm,
And you have to keep improving yourself. If you can use these criticisms in a productive way, your work will grow, and
mhm,
and just keep trucking.
mhm. That's great advice. Yeah, it is one of the hardest things is to face criticism, but you're absolutely right. You can't please everyone. And this is a story that your soul, your heart wants to tell. So you got to follow that muse. So good on you for keep trucking, right? Now, what advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time before you published your very first book?
Well, I would do like other, like all the successful indie authors that I know of, and that's build a list,
An email list, right?
build a mailing list.
Yeah, mailing list.
That's the key in everything that I've, been studying this year. It all comes down to that. Now you can, and I didn't do that. I focused on what I was writing
Mm.
and having the guts to publish it. And indie publishing was new, and in 2008 it was just burgeoning, and it was an opportunity for me. And I used a boutique publisher at the time because I really didn't know what I was doing, and
Mm.
you know and I'm glad I did, and I had to go through that process. But now things are different, and you have places where you can build your list, ways that you can build your list. You look into it. But I've had this problem that I have the two separate genres, and like I've collected emails that I have travelers. I call them my hot contacts. I have people that I've met on trips, and I have people who are interested in travel, but I don't have a big, because my novels are, they're separate entities. But I think the two horse books kind of go together. That's a little bit easier for me to market those together. But uh, I've had that problem, but I'm working through it. If you want to market books successfully, I think it's kind of what you have to do. This one author I know, Toby Neal, she had 12,000 on her list before she published her first book.
Mm.
And then she went on to do a series, which is the other way, which you know very well, to succeed as an indie author, is to do a series, and then you can play one off the next, blah, blah, blah. She makes a living, a good one. But she's a terrific marketer. She has a beautiful newsletter. She does tons of giveaways, and she's very creative. And like Carly is very
Thank you.
creative. We
Thank you,
like
Linda.
that. So I admire it. I mean, I enjoy creating little things for my books, but
Mm.
I certainly can't do a lovely book trailer like you do, which is very nice. I don't know if you do your own, but
I do, yeah.
yeah,
It's just one of those things that I mean, that's kind of I love what you're saying because the the most difficult part is getting the books written and building your backlist because I think that's where the most money comes in from is having multiple books and
uh,
then it's letting people know that you have these books. So it's never too late to start building your mailing lists and it's never too late to learn how to make a book trailer. That's the beauty of what we're doing when we're the indie authors. It's we can learn and keep educating ourselves and grow what we're doing. I mean, you have a product to sell, which is
right.
fantastic. Now you
It's a
just
product,
yeah, now you just bring people to the,
right?
into the circle. So, you know, you can start before you write your book, or you can start after. I mean, we have a lot of flexibility, which is really great. I mean, I would say get the book written first and then worry
Mm,
about the marketing later, unless you're already rolling and you know what you're doing. But for me, I think it's getting that book done. That's the most challenging thing, especially the first one, getting over that hill.
right,
So and there's always room to grow and improve, and you're working on that. So
right.
good on
Well,
you.
I had to write the books. I mean, the writing is my reasoning. I mean,
Hmm.
I've written stuff that's important to me that I hope people will enjoy and care about.
Hmm.
And then, marketing it is another aspect, which I really am having kind of fun with, because I'm finding some shortcuts, and seeing how all these things work together, and how I can work smarter. And I'd love to have a virtual assistant. I've tried a couple of times. It hasn't worked out because by the time I get through spoon feeding them everything they need to know, I might as well have done it myself, kind of thing, you know.
Hmm.
But it would be nice. Would be
Hmm.
nice. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, yeah, and there's always people out there to help too. So I really hear that you've got your thinking cap on and looking at how to build your marketing
Right.
funnels, which is great. So you've done a lot. You've written 8 books. You're writing about your passion, which is horses and traveling. What are you curious about? What's next beyond building your author business? Where are you
Well,
heading?
I'm working on a series, right? My next one, I said I had Lost Angel Walkabout, Lost
Awesome.
Angel in Paradise, right?
Hmm.
I'm a Lost Angel. I live in LA. And my next one, which I'm halfway done, have enough stories, Lost Angel Unleashed. What do you think?
Whoa.
It's going to be some of those stories that I might have held back, thinking they might have been not politically correct, or thinking they
Ooh.
might have hurt someone who was alive,
Mm.
or just didn't make the cut in time for the last book. I'll be collecting stories. That's what I'll be doing, and I love to do that. So I'll be happy to get back on the road.
Fantastic. So there's lots of light coming towards you with the writing and the traveling and
Yep.
building your author business. I'm so happy to hear about your success. So where can listeners find out more about you and your books, Linda?
Okay, well, I have 2 websites, like I said. Linda
Mhm.
Ballou author.com has all of my books, and you can purchase my books on my site. And if you do, you get a signed copy and free shipping.
Very cool.
However, I just went on Draft to Digital, which puts ebooks everywhere in the world. So I went on Ingram Sparks. So that means you can go on bookshop.org and support your local indie store and buy my book there. I mean, everywhere books are sold now. That's what I've done in the last year. My books
Fantastic.
are available in print and ebook. I'd love to get a review. If you do read my books, that's always a wonderful thing.
Yes, reviews help authors very, very much. It helps them keep writing and it helps people who are interested in what they're writing about find their books. So thank you for that. And then social media, where can people find you on social media?
Oh, well, I'm most active on Facebook. I am on Twitter. I guess I'm a little old school over there on Facebook, but I like it there. So, and YouTube. I have a ton of videos on YouTube, actually. I have lots on my travels. I have interviews from different places about my books. I have a playlist for get great trips for free with tips for people who would like to do that.
Hmm.
So, yeah, come and see me.
Very cool. And I'll make sure to link to all those places and your books in your show notes so people can get directly with you, Linda. And I really, really am glad we did this. Thank you so much for the gift of your time today.
Oh, Carly, it was great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I hope you enjoy these Q&A sessions with wonderful equine authors who love all things horses and riding, just like me. Visit my website, carlycadecreative.com, where you can read the show notes, and make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support. Want a free guide to secrets of horsebook authors? Gallop over to carlycadecreative.com/wisdom to have author advice delivered instantly to your inbox. If you are an author who writes about horses and would like to be spotlighted, please let me know. Visit my contact page at carlycadecreative.com to fill out a request. I'd be happy to have you on the show too. Thank you for tuning in to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. See you next time. I'm your host, Carly Cade. Creative writing makes my spurs jingle.